The Breaking Point Captain Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the UES Resilience, watching the stars blur past as her ship maintained a steady patrol route along the Meridian sector. She had been doing this for 8 years now, protecting human colonies that seemed to exist at the mercy of the Stellar Concordate's older, more powerful species. The view never got old, but the frustration that came with her duties certainly did. The Stellar Concordate had welcomed humanity 150 years ago with promises of cooperation, shared knowledge, and mutual protection. What they received instead was a carefully constructed system of inequality. Humans were allowed to join, but always as the newcomers who needed to prove themselves, always as the species that had to wait their turn, always as the ones who paid more, received less, and were expected to be grateful for the opportunity. Sarah remembered her first briefing at the academy. The instructors had been blunt about the reality. Humans paid triple the standard fees for concordate protection. Human merchant vessels were routinely delayed at checkpoints, while other species passed through freely. Human colonies were given the least desirable territories, the systems that nobody else wanted. When disputes arose, human complaints were filed away and forgotten while other species received immediate attention. Her second officer, Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, approached with a datapad. His expression told her something was wrong before he even spoke. "Captain, we have received an emergency transmission from the medical transport Nightingale. They are under attack in the Theta 9 corridor." Sarah's blood ran cold. The Nightingale was carrying 70 medical personnel and 40 children being evacuated from a disease outbreak on the colony world of Haven's Rest. It was a purely humanitarian mission, clearly marked with medical identifiers that every species in the galaxy recognized as protected under Concordate law. Who was attacking them? Sarah demanded, already moving toward the bridge. Marcus hesitated. The Vortak Third Fleet. They are claiming the Nightingale entered restricted space without authorization. Sarah burst onto the bridge, her crew already at battle stations. The main view screen showed the tactical display. The Nightingale was broadcasting distress signals, its shields failing under sustained fire from 3 Vortak destroyers. The Vortak Empire was one of the most aggressive species in the Concordate, a civilization built on military strength and territorial expansion. They had been encroaching on human space for years, always finding legal justifications for their actions. Helm, maximum speed to Theta 9. Weapons, charge all batteries. Communications, send a priority message to the Vortak Fleet Commander. Sarah's voice was ice. Tell them they are attacking a protected medical vessel and must cease fire immediately. The Resilience leaped forward, its engines pushing beyond safe limits. Sarah watched the distance counter drop, knowing that every second mattered. The communications officer looked up, her face pale. "Captain," the Vortak commander responded. "He says the Nightingale ignored warnings to change course. He says their actions are justified under Concordate military regulations." On screen, the Nightingale's shields collapsed. The destroyers poured fire into the helpless transport. Sarah watched in horror as escape pods began launching. Small, fragile vessels carrying desperate people into the void. The Vortak ships adjusted their aim and began targeting the pods. "They are shooting at escape pods," Marcus whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "They are murdering civilians." Sarah's hands gripped her command chair. Every instinct screamed at her to open fire to make the Vortak pay for this atrocity. But Concordate law was clear. Human ships could only engage in combat if directly threatened, or if they received authorization from Concordate command. Attacking Vortak vessels without permission would be considered an act of war, and humanity did not have the political power to survive the consequences. All she could do was watch as 70 adults and 40 children died in the cold vacuum of space. Watch as escape pods were systematically destroyed. Watch as the Nightingale broke apart under sustained fire, its hull fragmenting into debris that would drift forever in the darkness. When the Resilience arrived, there was nothing left but wreckage and bodies. The Vortak destroyers had already departed, their commanders confident that there would be no consequences for their actions. Sarah ordered her crew to recover what bodies they could. They worked in silence, each of them understanding that something fundamental had just broken. 6 hours later, Sarah found herself in a virtual conference with Concordate arbitrator Velkash, a member of the ancient Keltharian species that had helped found the Stellar Concordate millennia ago. His holographic form flickered in her ready room, his multiple eyes regarding her with what might have been pity or indifference. She could never tell with the Keltharians. Captain Chen, I have reviewed your report on the incident with the medical transport. Velkash's voice was calm, almost soothing. It is indeed unfortunate that lives were lost. However, the Vortak commander has provided evidence that the Nightingale ignored multiple warnings to change course. Under Section 47 of Concordat Military Code, his actions were within acceptable parameters. Sarah felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. Acceptable parameters? They murdered children. They shot at escape pods. There is no interpretation of Concordat law that makes that legal. Velkash's eyes blinked in sequence. The Vortak Empire is an important member of the Concordat. They have been part of our alliance for 8,000 years. Their interpretation of security protocols must be given appropriate weight. I understand your species finds this outcome distressing, but you must understand that humanity is still learning how galactic governance functions. Sarah stood slowly. For 150 years, my people have followed every rule you set. We have paid every fee, accepted every insult, swallowed every injustice. We did this because we believed in the Concordat's promise of cooperation and mutual respect. She paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But you just told me that murdering our children is acceptable as long as the right species does it. Captain, I must warn you that your tone is inappropriate for addressing a Concordat arbitrator. Sarah reached down and closed her briefcase with a sharp click. Arbitrator Velkash, I want you to listen very carefully to what I am about to say. I am filing a formal protest of your decision with Earth Central Command. I am recommending that humanity withdraw from all Concordat joint operations. And I am personally requesting that my government reconsider our membership in an organization that values ancient species over basic morality. Velkash's hologram flickered with what might have been surprise. Captain, if humanity withdraws from Concordat operations, you will lose access to protected trade routes, military intelligence, and diplomatic support. Your colonies will be vulnerable to any species that decides to take them. You cannot survive without the Concordat. Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then I suppose we will find out just how much humanity can survive. This conversation is over. She terminated the connection before he could respond. For a long moment, she stood in the silence of her ready room, feeling the weight of what she had just done. Then her communications panel chimed with an incoming message marked with the highest priority encryption. It came directly from Earth Central Command. Sarah opened it and read the brief text. Her hands began to shake, not with fear, but with something she had not felt in years. Hope. All human ambassadors were being recalled from Concordat worlds. All human military forces were ordered to defensive positions around colony systems. And buried in the military codes at the end of the message was a single phrase that every officer in the Earth Space Forces knew, though most had never expected to see it activated. Protocol Horizon is now active. All units prepare for unrestricted combat operations. Sarah sat down heavily, her mind racing through the implications. Protocol Horizon was the contingency plan that humanity had been developing since the day they joined the Concordat. It was the plan for what would happen if diplomacy failed, if patience ran out, if humanity finally said enough. She pulled up her tactical display and began reviewing fleet positions. Around her across human space, thousands of officers were doing the same thing. Ships that had seemed like simple patrol vessels were revealing hidden weapons bays. Civilian stations were activating military-grade shields. Mining operations in remote systems were powering up sensor arrays that could track ships across entire sectors. For 150 years, humanity had been playing the role of the weak newcomer. But while they smiled and nodded and followed the rules, they had been preparing, learning, building, waiting for the moment when patience would no longer be enough. Sarah opened a channel to her bridge crew. All hands, this is the captain. I need everyone at their stations in 5 minutes. We have new orders from Earth Command. Her voice was steady, controlled. The Concordat is about to learn that humanity's patience was not weakness, it was preparation. And our preparation just ended. The Resilience's engines hummed to life as the ship changed course. Across human space, hundreds of vessels were doing the same, moving into position, preparing for what came next. The galaxy had pushed humanity too far, dismissed their protests too many times, ignored their pain too often. Now they would discover what happened when humans finally stopped being patient. The thunder of war. The first strike came exactly 12 hours after Protocol Horizon was activated. And it came in a way the Concordat never expected. Not with massive fleets or dramatic declarations, but with silence. Every Concordat military network that relied on human-designed communication relays suddenly went dark. Trade routes that used human-maintained navigation beacons reported complete system failures. Security protocols that incorporated human encryption standards simply stopped working. In less than an hour, the vast infrastructure of the stellar Concordat began fragmenting into isolated pockets of confused commands and contradictory orders. Admiral James Walker watched from the command center deep beneath Earth's surface as the galaxy's communication networks collapsed into chaos. For 70 years, human technology companies had been providing upgrades to Concordat systems. Better efficiency, improved compatibility, enhanced security. What the Concordat species never questioned was why humans offered such advanced technology at such reasonable prices. Now they had their answer. Every upgrade had included hidden access points, backdoors carefully disguised in millions of lines of code. Every improvement had made Concordat systems more dependent on human infrastructure. And now, with a single command sequence, humanity had pulled the foundation out from under the galaxy's military command structure. Admiral, we have confirmation that Vortak fleet deployments are in complete disarray. The intelligence officer's voice held barely contained satisfaction. Their 3rd, 7th, and 9th fleets are receiving contradictory orders. Some ships are being told to hold position while others are being ordered to opposite ends of their territory. Walker nodded slowly. And our fleets? Captain Sarah Chen's task force has engaged Vortak positions in the Meridian sector. The Resilience is leading a formation of 37 ships. They have complete tactical superiority. The Vortak forces cannot coordinate defensive responses. Walker pulled up the tactical feed from Sarah's engagement. What he saw made him understand why humanity had waited so long for this moment. The Resilience moved through space with precision that should have been impossible for a ship its size. Around it, smaller vessels darted and weaved in patterns that looked almost like a dance. This was not the fleet of patrol ships and colony defenders that the Concordat had dismissed for 150 years. These were warships that had been designed from the beginning for this exact scenario. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Resilience, watching as her fleet approached the Kronos Gate, a massive Vortak military installation that controlled access to 15 human colony systems. Intelligence reports indicated the station held a garrison of 50,000 Vortak soldiers and was protected by a fleet of 73 warships. Under normal circumstances, it would take a force 5 times larger to have any hope of capturing such a fortification, but these were not normal circumstances. Target the station's communication arrays first. Sarah's voice was calm as she gave orders. Then disable their power generation. I want them blind and helpless before they even understand we are attacking. The Resilience's weapons batteries opened fire, but not with the energy weapons that most species used. Instead, streams of what looked like small metallic spheres shot toward the station at incredible velocity. Railgun projectiles, each one carrying enough kinetic energy to punch through any shield in the galaxy. The Concordat had grown comfortable with energy-based warfare. They had forgotten that sometimes the simplest weapons were the most effective. The projectiles struck the station's external communication arrays, shredding the delicate equipment instantly. More projectiles followed, targeting power generators, shield projectors, and sensor stations with surgical precision. Within 3 minutes, the Kronos Gate was completely isolated, unable to call for help or even understand what was happening. The Vortak fleet scrambled to respond, but they were fighting blind. Their targeting computers were receiving false data from sensors that humanity had quietly compromised years ago. Their communication systems were filled with contradictory orders. Their fleet coordination, normally their greatest strength, had become their worst vulnerability. Sarah watched as her ships moved through the Vortak formation like sharks through a school of fish. Human vessels used their superior maneuverability to stay in the blind spots of the larger Vortak warships. When they did attack, it was with weapons the Vortak had never encountered before. Swarms of autonomous drones that could think and adapt faster than any organic crew, directed electromagnetic pulses that fried electronics, while leaving hull structures intact, quantum encrypted missiles that could not be jammed or intercepted. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, 68 Vortak warships were disabled and drifting. 5 had been destroyed when their reactors overloaded. The Kronos Gate's defenses were completely offline, and the human fleet had suffered exactly 3 casualties when a lucky Vortac shot penetrated the shields of a frigate. Sarah opened a communication channel to the Kronos Gate commander. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Forces. Your station is surrounded and your fleet is defeated. I am offering you one chance to surrender peacefully. Power down all remaining weapons and prepare to be boarded." The Vortac commander's face appeared on screen, his features twisted with rage and disbelief. "You are insects. The Vortac Empire has existed for 10,000 years. We have conquered species far more powerful than humanity. This is impossible." Sarah's expression did not change. "Commander, in the past 12 hours, human forces have engaged Vortac positions in 17 different systems. We have disabled or destroyed over 300 of your warships. We have cut off your supply lines and isolated your fleet groups, and we have done this while suffering minimal casualties." She leaned forward slightly. "This is not impossible. This is what happens when you push a patient species too far." The Vortac commander's eyes widened as he processed the scope of what she was telling him. 17 systems, 300 ships, in 12 hours. It was not a battle. It was a systematic dismantling of everything the Vortac Empire had built over millennia. "You have 10 minutes to decide," Sarah continued. "Surrender and your crew will be treated well. Refuse, and we will disable your station's life support and leave you to drift. The choice is yours." She closed the channel and turned to Marcus. "How are the other engagements progressing?" Marcus pulled up status reports from across human space. "Admiral Park has secured the Denali cluster. Commander Hassan has taken control of the Alexandria trade hub. Captain Okonkwo reports successful operations in the Outer Rim territories. Every single engagement has resulted in overwhelming human victory with minimal casualties on both sides." Sarah nodded. "We are not here to slaughter them. We are here to prove that we can. There is a difference." Across the galaxy, other concordate species watched the human offensive with growing alarm. The Keltharian High Council convened an emergency session. The Draknari Assembly debated whether to intervene. The Sorvathian clans discussed their options in heated arguments that lasted for hours, but nobody moved to help the Vortac. Because every species was doing the same calculation. If humanity could do this to the Vortac, who had been considered one of the Concordate's most powerful military forces, what could they do to anyone else? The message was clear. Humanity had been holding back for 150 years. They had accepted discrimination and exploitation not because they were weak, but because they were patient. They had followed the rules not because they had to, but because they chose to. And now that they had chosen differently, nothing in the galaxy could stop them. On the second day of what would later be called the 6-Day War, 3 concordate species formally declared neutrality and opened direct negotiations with Earth. The Sorvathians, who had always been traders first and warriors second, sent a delegation offering to mediate. The Draknari, who respected strength above all else, extended an invitation for humanity to join their military alliance. The Keltharians, who had ruled the Concordate for millennia, remained silent, watching and calculating. Admiral Walker stood in the Earth Central Command Center, monitoring reports from every front. The war was progressing exactly as planned. Human forces were achieving their objectives with minimal losses. Vortac military capacity was being systematically destroyed, and most importantly, humanity was demonstrating restraint even in the midst of overwhelming victory. Every disabled enemy ship received medical assistance. Every captured Vortac soldier was treated according to the highest standards of warfare. Every civilian population in contested systems was protected and provided with humanitarian aid. Humanity was not fighting this war for conquest or revenge. They were fighting to prove a point that should never have needed proving, that they deserved respect, that they deserved equality, that they deserved to be treated as equals by a galaxy that had dismissed them for too long. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Resilience, looking out at the disabled Vortac fleet. Her crew was already working to repair damaged vessels and evacuate wounded personnel. In a few hours, they would move to the next objective. Then the next. Each victory building on the last until the entire galaxy understood that humanity's patience had limits. Marcus joined her at the window. "Do you think they will finally understand, Captain? After all this, will they finally see us as equals?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, though it did not reach her eyes. They will understand that we can destroy them. Whether they will see us as equals depends on what we build after the fighting stops." Her expression hardened. "But one thing is certain. Never again will they treat human lives as acceptable losses. Never again will they ignore our protests. Never again will they assume our patience as weakness." Behind them, the Resilience's engines hummed as the ship prepared to jump to the next engagement. The war was far from over, but humanity had already achieved something that 150 years of diplomacy could not. They had the galaxy's complete and undivided attention, and they were just getting started. A new dawn on the 5th day of the war, Admiral James Walker received an unexpected transmission from Warlord Zenthor, Supreme Commander of the Vortak Empire. The holographic image that appeared in the command center showed a warrior whose pride had been shattered. Zenthor's ceremonial armor, once polished to a mirror shine, was scorched and damaged. His three eyes, normally bright with confidence, were dull with exhaustion. "Admiral Walker, I request a meeting to discuss terms." The warlord's voice, which had once thundered commands across 100 worlds, was subdued. "The Vortak Empire acknowledges that continuing this conflict serves no purpose." Walker studied the alien commander for a long moment. He had reviewed the casualty reports from both sides. Over 12,000 Vortak soldiers had been killed in the fighting. Human casualties stood at 47 dead and 200 injured. The mathematical reality of the war was brutal and undeniable. Humanity could destroy the Vortak Empire completely if they chose to continue. But that had never been the goal. "Warlord Zenthor, I will agree to meet with you, but understand that these negotiations will include representatives from all concordant species. What we discuss will reshape the entire galaxy, not just the relationship between humans and Vortak." Walker paused. "And Captain Sarah Chen will lead the human delegation. She was there when this war started. She deserves to be there when it ends." 24 hours later, Sarah stood in the grand conference chamber aboard the neutral station of Sanctuary Point. The room had been designed to accommodate dozens of different species, with varying atmospheres, gravity settings, and environmental needs. Around the massive circular table sat representatives from every major concordant species. The Keltharians in their environmental suits, the Draknari with their crystalline forms reflecting light in complex patterns, the Sorvathians with their multiple limbs folded in postures of careful attention, and Warlord Zenthor, sitting alone at one end of the table, the weight of his empire's defeat visible in every line of his body. Sarah activated the holographic display at the center of the table. Images appeared showing human colonies, trade stations, and civilian populations. For 150 years, humanity has been part of the stellar concordat. In that time, we have paid substantially more than any other species for basic protections. We have been denied equal representation in concordant decisions. Our merchant vessels have been subjected to delays and restrictions that other species never face. Our colonies have been given the least desirable territories, and when we have built something valuable, more powerful species have taken it from us. She changed the image to show the wreckage of the Nightingale, and when our children were murdered in an unprovoked attack on a medical transport, we were told this was acceptable under concordant law. She let the image hang in the air for a moment. That was the moment humanity's patience ended. One of the Keltharian representatives, High Arbiter Velmoth, shifted in his environmental suit. "Captain Chen, the concordant acknowledges that mistakes were made in handling human concerns, but surely this level of military response was excessive. You have crippled the Vortak Empire. You have demonstrated weapons technology that threatens the balance of power across the entire galaxy. How can we trust that humanity will not use this power to dominate others, as you claim the Vortak tried to dominate you?" Sarah turned to face the Keltharian directly. "Because we have had the power to dominate the galaxy for decades, and we chose not to use it." She pulled up technical specifications showing human weapons development timelines. "Our military technology has been superior to concordant standards for at least 40 years. We could have launched this offensive at any time. We could have conquered rather than joined. But we chose patience. We chose diplomacy. We chose to believe that the Concordat would eventually treat us fairly." She paused, letting the information sink in. "We were wrong to believe that. But our restraint demonstrates something important. Humanity does not seek conquest. We seek equality. And we have proven that we have both the strength to demand it and the wisdom to use that strength responsibly." Warlord Zenthor stood slowly, his posture showing a deference that was alien to his proud species. Captain Chen, the Vortak Empire has existed for 10 millennia. We have fought hundreds of wars. We have conquered dozens of species. We believed strength and age gave us the right to impose our will on others. His three eyes fixed on her. In 6 days you have taught us that we were wrong, not just about humanity, but about the very foundation of how we have conducted ourselves for thousands of years. He gestured to the holographic display showing the battle data. You defeated us not through brutality, but through superior strategy and technology. You disabled our ships rather than destroying them when possible. You treated our wounded and protected our civilians. You demonstrated that true strength is not about domination, but about having the power to destroy and choosing instead to build. Sarah nodded slowly. Warlord, your species made a terrible mistake when you attacked the Nightingale, but I do not believe that mistake defines who the Vortak are. What defines you is what you choose to do next. She gestured around the table. That applies to every species here. The old Concordat was built on inequality. It gave special privileges to ancient species and treated younger civilizations as lesser members. That system is finished. We are here to build something better. Over the next 8 hours, they hammered out the framework of what would become the Treaty of New Horizons. Every species would have equal representation in Concordat decisions, regardless of how long they had been members. No species would pay higher fees or face greater restrictions than any other. A new joint defense initiative would be created, with rotating command between species and strict rules about when military force could be used. The most controversial element was humanity's insistence on a truth and reconciliation process. Every species that had participated in discriminatory practices would formally acknowledge their actions and agree to restitution. The Vortak Empire would pay compensation to the families of the Nightingale victims. The Caltharians would return territories they had taken from younger species through legal manipulation. The entire corrupt structure of favoritism and exploitation would be dismantled. Many delegates objected. Some argued that this was too harsh, that it humiliated proud civilizations. Others claimed that humanity was using its military victory to impose its values on the entire galaxy. But Sarah's response was consistent. You had 150 years to treat us fairly. You chose not to. Now we are ensuring that no other species will face what we faced. This is not revenge. This is justice. As the negotiations progressed into their second day, something remarkable happened. Smaller species that had never dared to speak up in Concordat proceedings began to find their voices. The Novari, a peaceful civilization that had been exploited for their scientific knowledge, shared stories of technology stolen by more powerful species. The Threni, whose colony worlds had been seized under dubious legal pretexts, demanded their territories be returned. The Voss, who had been paying excessive protection fees for decades, insisted on reimbursement. Sarah listened to each testimony, documenting every grievance. This was what the war had really been about. Not just humanity's suffering, but the suffering of every species that had been too weak to fight back. Humanity had simply been the first to have both the capability and the will to say enough. On the 6th day, as the sun rose over Earth for those watching from the command center, the Treaty of New Horizons was formally signed. Representatives from 43 species added their marks to the document that would reshape galactic civilization. Some signed eagerly, seeing opportunity. Others signed reluctantly, accepting a reality they could not change. But they all signed. Warlord Zenthor approached Sarah as the ceremony concluded. His posture showed a respect that his species rarely offered to anyone. Captain Chen, I want you to know that the Vortak Empire will honor every aspect of this treaty. More than that, we will work to become the species that deserves to be part of this new Concordat. His three eyes held something that might have been shame. We cannot undo the deaths we caused, but we can ensure they were not meaningless. We can build something better. Sarah extended her hand in the human gesture of respect. Warlord, the fact that you are here, that you are willing to change, gives me hope. This war should never have been necessary. But if it leads to a galaxy where all species are truly equal, then perhaps those who died did not die in vain. Admiral Walker stood in the Earth Central Command Center, watching the broadcast of the treaty signing. Around him, officers who had spent sleepless nights coordinating military operations finally allowed themselves to relax. President Maria Santos joined him at the observation window. Admiral, What humanity accomplished in these 6 days will be studied for millennia. We proved that patience is not weakness, that diplomacy is not surrender, and that the willingness to fight for justice does not make us monsters. She paused. But I wonder if the galaxy truly understands what we were trying to teach them. Walker smiled slightly. Some do, Madam President. Some still see only our military power. But I believe that over time, more will understand that our greatest strength was not our weapons or our tactics. It was our willingness to exhaust every peaceful option before resorting to force, and our decision to show mercy even in the midst of overwhelming victory. On the observation deck of the Resilience, Sarah watched as her crew celebrated the war's end. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez stood beside her, both of them exhausted but satisfied. Marcus spoke quietly. Captain, do you think this peace will last? Will they really treat us as equals now? Sarah was silent for a long moment, watching the stars. The treaty ensures legal equality, but true equality, the kind that comes from genuine respect rather than fear, that will take time. We showed them we can destroy them. Now we have to show them we can build with them, that we can be partners rather than conquerors. She smiled slightly. It took us 150 years of patience to prepare for 6 days of war. I expect it will take us decades of work to build the peace we want. Marcus nodded. But we proved something important. We proved that humanity does not give up, not when we believe in something. Sarah looked out at the vastness of space, at the hundreds of stars that marked human colonies and the thousands more that represented other civilizations. For 150 years we bent. We accepted abuse. We swallowed insults. We followed rules designed to keep us down. And through all of that, we never stopped preparing for the day when patience would no longer be enough. She turned to face her second officer. That is who humans are, Marcus. We are patient until patience fails. We are diplomatic until diplomacy becomes complicity. We are peaceful until peace requires us to accept injustice. And when we finally act, we do it with such overwhelming force that no one ever questions our resolve again. Around the galaxy, historians were already beginning to analyze the 6-day war. They studied the tactics, debated the ethics, and argued about the long-term implications. But the lesson that resonated across countless worlds was simpler than any academic analysis. There was a species from a small blue world in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. A species that had been patient for 150 years while being exploited and dismissed. A species that had followed every rule, accepted every insult, and maintained their composure through decades of injustice. And when that patience finally ended, when that species decided they had endured enough, they reshaped the entire galaxy in 6 days. That species was humanity, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again. 50 years later, students across concordate space would learn about the war in their history classes. They would study the battles and analyze the technology. But the most important lesson was taught by Professor Chen, daughter of Captain Sarah Chen, who had lived through those 6 remarkable days. My mother used to say that patience is humanity's greatest strength and our most dangerous weapon. We will endure almost anything. We will try every peaceful solution. We will exhaust every diplomatic option. But we never forget, and we never stop preparing for the day when patience is no longer enough. She would pause and look at her students, many of them from species that had once dismissed humanity as weak. The 6-day war was not about revenge. It was about establishing a principle that should have been obvious from the beginning, that every species, regardless of age or military power, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. My mother and her generation fought that war so that none of you would ever have to fight it again. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity's patience was vast, but it was not infinite. And when it finally ran out, the sound echoed across 1,000 worlds, changing everything forever. The new Concordate thrived because it was built on genuine equality rather than hierarchical power. Species cooperated because they wanted to, not because they were forced to. Conflicts were resolved through arbitration rather than military force. And when threats did arise, the Joint Defense Initiative responded with overwhelming force commanded by rotating leadership from all member species. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had done something far more remarkable. They had forced the galaxy to live up to its own ideals, to treat all species with the respect and dignity that should have been granted from the beginning, and they had done it in 6 days that changed everything. Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen and commander of the Joint Defense Initiative, stood on the observation deck of the new flagship Unity. Around her, crew members from dozens of different species worked together with an efficiency that would have been impossible in the old Concordat. She thought about the Nightingale, about the 70 adults and 40 children who had died in an attack that should never have happened. Their deaths had sparked a war. But that war had built a peace that might actually last. A galaxy where no species would ever again have to choose between accepting injustice and fighting for their basic rights. It was not perfect. There were still problems, still conflicts, still species that struggled with the new reality of genuine equality. But it was better. And it would continue to improve because humanity, patient and determined, would make sure of it. Sarah smiled as she watched the stars. Humanity had finally snapped after 150 years of patience, and in snapping they had broken not just their enemies but the entire corrupt system that had enabled those enemies. Now they were building something better, something worthy of the sacrifice, something that might actually live up to the promise that the old Concordat had failed to keep. A galaxy where all species, no matter how young or how old, stood as equals under the stars.